Okay, so hello to all of you down in the dumps, newly divorced men out there who had a cheating wife. And trust me, I know how you feel. Oh, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with your screen because this is an audio. It's not a video. Now, before I get started here, let me say this. I do not have any kind of credentials that qualifies me to tell you what to do or what not to do before, during, or even after your divorce. This audio is all about what I did after my divorce was over with and after all the dust had settled, and everything worked out really well for me, and it can for you too. Now, even though this audio is about my own personal experience after my divorce and some of my own personal remedies to my own situation, I will be making a few recommendations of my own that may or may not be helpful to you. Now, if you're not divorced yet, or you're just now going through a divorce, then I recommend that you stop right here and go see a divorce lawyer because they can help you a lot more than I can. This audio that I'm doing is strictly for those divorced men who already have that courthouse in their rearview mirror and who would like to try to just keep on going and find a normal life again. And I'm going to tell you what, if you try, you will find a normal life again. And I know this for a fact because I did. But before I get into all of that, let me say this. If you will ask about 10 different people what their definition of marriage is, then you'll probably get just about 10 different kind of answers. Now, I really don't want to get off into the weeds on the definition of what marriage is. But for me personally, marriage is when a man and a woman join together in the eyes of God and become one flesh, because that's right out of the Bible. And for most all normal husbands, they don't like other men touching their flesh. And it's the same way with most normal wives too. They don't like some other woman touching their flesh either. And I'm going to tell you what, this kind of flesh touching, also known as adultery, can get some folks hurt, both mentally and physically. Because as you already know, adultery is a very serious matter. And in fact, God himself listed adultery right in between thou shalt not kill and thou shalt not steal. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, and I don't even know who comes up with these numbers. But I read somewhere where just about half of the men out there will cheat on their wife. And just about half of the women out there will cheat on their husband. But now, like I said, I don't know if any of this is true or not. But if it is true, then it sure seems to me like that there's a lot of cheating going on out there. And yes, I know there are such things as what's called open marriages and husband and wife swapping clubs and all that kind of immoral kind of stuff. And just in case you're wondering, then let it be known that I am not and never have been one of them, because I come from the old school where two hearts stay true to each other, and that's it. You know, when a man and a woman get married, they usually put all of their trust, all of their hopes, and all of their dreams in each other, because that's just a normal thing to do. But when one of them goes out and cheats or commits adultery, then that is not a normal thing to do in a marriage if you love your spouse and your children. But now adultery or infidelity, or whatever you want to call it, that's going way past the line, because that's the ultimate betrayal, and it's a death blow to that marriage. And if those two spouses have children, then those children have also been betrayed. Adultery is not only wrong and immoral, but it's also dangerous because of the risk of catching some kind of a deadly venereal disease. And you know, there's even some folks who have caught the deadly 38 caliber lead poisoning disease. But oh my gosh, you would never, ever want to be involved in anything like that. And if you've ever had any thoughts of doing anything like that, then please go and seek some professional help now. Please. I already know that right now you think you are at the very lowest point in your life, and you've already read all of the books and you've been to counseling, and you've been to the group therapies, and nothing seems to help. So now, as a last resort, you have found your way to my little bitty audio on YouTube. But now let me tell you this, the only person in the world who can help you is just you. And I'm sorry, but that's just the way it really is. But I can tell you this, you will eventually realize that happiness is really just a state of mind, and so is sadness. So it's really your choice to be either happy or to be sad. It's really up to you. And I can tell you this too, when you start realizing that your ex-wife is now some other man's headache, then that should make you real happy. And now, with all that said, let me say this. I've got some good news for you, and I've got some bad news for you. But let me go ahead and get the bad news out of the way first. And the bad news is, if you and your ex-wife have any children together, then you will never, ever totally get rid of your ex-wife. And that's just the way that it's going to always be. Because as the years go by, there will always be birthday parties and graduations and things like that to attend. And I don't mean just for your kids, but even on down through your grandkids. And trust me, when you're at one of those events, that big old elephant will always be in the room with you. And no, I'm not talking about that big fat ugly elephant. I'm talking about the big invisible elephant that's going to be in the room with you. And it doesn't matter how old that elephant is, or even if it's getting really long in the tusk, that old invisible elephant will still always be there. Trust me. Okay, so now that was the bad news. So now here's the good news. And the good news is, in time, you will learn to deal with it, and you will learn to live with it. And even though there will always be some scars left over from it, time does have a way of healing everything. And even though my divorce happened 40 years ago, when it comes to a divorce, those kind of heartaches that come with it never change. But listen to me, the way you're feeling right now, down in the dumps and all that stuff, it's a normal thing because you just don't spend a large chunk of your life with another person who you love and then be forced to walk away from it without being hurt. And that's just the way it is. But trust me, you can get through all of this and be successful. And one of the definitions of success is having the ability to get back on your feet after you have been knocked down. So there you go. And now this is my opportunity to tell my story and how I handled things, and hopefully it will be beneficial to you. But remember now, I am not an expert on what you should or should not do after a divorce, because I don't have any kind of college degrees on the subject. So all I'm going to do is just talk about some of the things that I did after my divorce. And it's mostly just all common sense stuff, but it all seemed to work out very well for me, and it can for you too. So here I go. Now I'm not going to go into 100 different stories about all of the nasty things that my ex-wife did to me during and after our divorce. But I'm going to tell you what, some of those terrible stories would probably even make a preacher cuss. And you've probably even got some of those same kind of stories yourself. Now, I'm not going to go into all the crazy little details and bore you to death, because for you, it would be just like what that famous baseball player once said. It would be deja vu all over again. But boy howdy, I'm going to tell you what. After she divorced me and walked out on me and took our children with her, I was devastated because I thought I had always been a good husband and a good father, and I loved my wife and our children, and I always worked and provided for my family. Now I know I'm not a perfect person, and I'm certainly no Puritan, and it took me a long time to realize that it wasn't anything that I had done wrong. so much as it was that she just wasn't happy. And she just didn't want to be married to me anymore. And believe it or not, that was it. You know, there can be some bad days in a man's life that he will never forget. And I will never forget that day that she sat me down and told me that we need to talk. And then when she told me that she had been seeing another man, and I mean really seeing another man, then you could have hit me in the head with a hammer and it would not have hurt as much. And I didn't even see it coming. The signs were all there. I just didn't know how to read the signs. You know, I just never was good enough for anything. I wasn't tall enough, and I wasn't handsome enough, and I wasn't smart enough, and I didn't make enough money. And gosh, I never knew that I had so many different faults until she pointed them all out to me and told me all about them. I was a loser. Now, is all of this stuff starting to sound a little familiar to you? And let me tell you something. She already knew that she was going to leave me long before I knew it, because there was definitely some greener pastures on the other side of the fence. But boy, howdy, after she took our kids and left me, I just wandered around for a little while like a zombie, not knowing what to do. But fortunately for me, I had enough common sense to not crawl into a bottle or get on any kind of drugs or any other crazy stuff like that. Now, I won't say it wasn't tempting, because it was, but I did at least have enough good common sense to just say no to all of that kind of stuff. And I still remember that one of the first things that I realized that I needed to do, and that was to let her go and get me back. And part of that getting me back involved keeping my health up, because I wasn't sleeping very good at night, and I had totally lost my appetite. So what I did, instead of taking any kind of pills, I just quit consuming caffeine, coffee and soft drinks. And while some folks like to go to the gym every day, I would just take a walk around the park for my exercise. And I made it a point to eat some healthy food every day, whether I was hungry or not. And guess what? It all worked. And being healthy and rested every day makes all the difference in the world, and especially when you're having to readjust to the single life again. And I will say, it was not easy doing that, but I finally did it. And I'm going to tell you what, as you may already know, sitting around in a quiet and empty apartment is no fun at all. And just staring at four walls is not any good either. So what I did is I got off of my duff and I joined several singles groups where I made many new friends, and many of those new friends became lifelong friends. And it was in those same single groups where I met other people who had either gone through or were going through the exact same thing that I was experiencing. And that right there alone was very helpful to me. After 14 years, 3 months, and 21 days of marriage, and being totally faithful to my wife and my children, and not having ever been out with another woman in many years, I still remember how nervous I was the first time I asked another woman out for a date. And here I was, a 35-year-old grown man who was as nervous as a 16-year-old teenage boy who was on his first date. But I soon got over all of that too when I started realizing that most all of us in my age group were not in high school anymore, and none of us, men or women, were anybody's prize catch anymore. And in fact, many people had even grown a baggage handle right on the top of their head since our high school days. I didn't go out on any dates very often because, you see, I was one of those very rare ex-husbands who actually paid all of his child support every month. So I didn't have any money for dating or for just about anything else. But I also learned that you really don't need any money to make a lot of new friends and have a good time. And in a way, I was very lucky because my ex-wife had found her new freedom wings, which meant that I got my 3 children almost every weekend. And what a good time we had too, doing many things together and making good memories together, and memories that we still enjoy looking back on and talking about today. Okay, so let's say you don't have any children. Well, that still doesn't mean you can't get out and join some single groups and have a good time and make a lot of new friends. You can still do that. And there is something else that I did after my divorce that helped keep my mind occupied and helped keep my mind off of her. And that was taking up a hobby, and one that I really enjoyed doing. And let me tell you what, there are literally hundreds of different kind of hobbies out there that you can choose from. Just pick one out that you really love to do and do it. And the good news is, many hobbies cost very little money to do. And trust me, having a hobby that you really love to do is a great way that will help keep your mind off of her. And you know, I could have just buried myself in my job at work and become what's called a workaholic. But I'm sure glad I didn't do that, because I would have missed out on a lot of good things in life, like the early morning walks through the parks and enjoying nature and making many new friends, and all of those many picnics and campouts and the many fun activities that I got to do with my children as they were growing up. And oh my gosh, looking back on it all, I am so glad that I kept my life together so I could be a major influence in my children's lives as they were all growing up. And these are just some of the things that I am so thankful to God for. Now, I have no idea what your religion is, and it's really none of my business, so I'm not even going to try to give you some kind of a sermon. But I will say this, for me personally, I'm a believer in God, and I believe in Jesus Christ too, who is my Lord and my Savior. And I believe it was my faith that helped me get through the most lowest point in my lifetime. So there you go. Think about it. And there was something else that I noticed not long after my divorce that was very pleasant and unexpected. And that's how calm and quiet that everything became around me, because there was nobody there anymore to criticize me and gripe and complain about everything under the sun and tell me how wrong I am about everything. And it was then when I discovered just how true that old saying is. You never know how hot it is in the kitchen until you get out of the kitchen. It was no fun at all at first, but the truth of the matter is, after I'd been single for a couple of years, I was really starting to like it. And I eventually quit worrying about all of the garbage that my ex-wife was feeding into our young children's minds, because I realized that our young children would grow up and become adults, and they'll have their own eyes, their own ears, and their own brains, and they will be forming their own opinions. And guess what? I was right. You know, when I married my first wife and we had our 3 children, I think I was the happiest man on the planet. But when she started seeing other men, and then she walked out on me and took our children with her, I thought it was the end of my world. But now listen up now, because this is very important. At that time, when I was at the very lowest point in my life, I had no idea that in just 3 years, the best part of my life would begin. In those first 3 years after my divorce, I did date a few women here and there and now and then. But like I said before, I didn't have a lot of money, so I couldn't really afford the old traditional type of date. You know, getting dressed up, the candlelight dinner with a glass of wine, and taking her to a movie, that kind of dating. And I'm going to say something else about dating for all of you divorced men out there. You're going to find out that some of these women who are in your age group are very bitter towards men. And that's usually because their ex-husbands cheated on them, just like your ex-wife cheated on you. So I'm just telling you, try not to be too judgmental of these women, because after all, they're hurting too, just like you are. And they're going to need time to get over it, just like you're going to need time to get over it too. So think about that. So anyway, and right after my divorce, and at the time, I was being just like any other newly divorced man. I was just out there kind of checking out the field and seeing what was out there. But I eventually just kind of gave up because I wasn't seeing any woman out there who I thought that I would ever want to be married to. But as good luck will sometimes happen, there was this one night in October when I went to one of my single club's dances, and just by accidental chance, I just happened to meet this very nice-looking lady who just happened to be visiting my dance club that night. And you know what? There's an old saying that's absolutely true. Good things will come to those who wait for it. And I'm going to tell you what else is true. When you quit looking for that right person, then that's when that right person will come along. And not only was she prettier than my first wife, she actually liked me. And we became very good friends right away. And we had many things in common too. We had many of the same likes and dislikes. We had both only been married once. Her husband had been cheating on her, and my wife had been cheating on me. And she and I used to joke and laugh sometimes about how our low class and no class ex-spouses should marry each other so they could cheat on each other. And at that time, I had been single for 3 years, and she had been single for 13 years. And even though I was still dealing with it some, she was mostly all finished with any bitterness that she may have had with her ex-husband. So I was really lucky, and probably much luckier than she was. But let me tell you something, and this is from the voice of experience. When you meet that right woman, you'll know it. And you know what else? She'll know that she has met the right man too. And you can trust me on that one. So anyway, we married, and oh my gosh, I cannot believe that's been 37 years ago since we first met. And I'm going to tell you what, it's been a wonderful 37 years with each other. And a good friend of ours once gave us a very nice compliment when she told us that the thing that she likes about us the very most is the fact that we are living proof that second marriages can and do work. Now, I don't know if my first wife ever found her greener pasture or not, but I do know this. I found my greener pasture, and I love it. And as far as my ex-wife goes, and from just hearing my adult children talking, I don't think my ex-wife ever did find any happiness. And for all of you newly divorced men out there, here's something that you probably should know. My wife has always told me that the one thing that attracted her to me the very most was the fact that I was always genuine, and I never did try to be someone who I wasn't. And she said that it never did matter to her that I didn't have any money, because I was honest and I loved my kids. And I want to say something to you men out there who are hurting right now and who are bitter towards women. And there are many of you out there who are like that, and I used to be one of you. I'm telling you, not all women are bad. There are a lot of good women out there. So please, don't let the one bad apple who you mistakenly married run the whole barrel of the other women who are out there. Because believe it or not, there really are a lot of good single women who are available. And I know this for a fact because I found one of them, which makes that old saying very true. One man's trash can be another man's treasure. And I found my treasure. And I'm going to tell you something else that should give you even some more hope. Even though we don't have any children together, my second marriage has been everything that my first marriage should have been, but wasn't. So there you go. Think about that. Okay, so now I'd like to say something to all of you divorced men out there about dating. And the first thing that I would like to say is that I'm really no expert on dating, but I've been around long enough to have learned a lot about human nature. But first, let me say this. I have read the books about dating. I have listened to lectures about dating. And I've even watched videos about dating. And they were all put together by the experts. You know, those folks with their college degrees on those kind of subjects like dating. And the one thing that I have noticed that they all seem to have in common with each other is they are always trying to teach people to put on some kind of a phony mask in order to be attractive to the opposite sex. But I'm going to tell you what, I may not be one of those experts on dating, but I do have some common sense. And I believe what they're teaching is a bunch of hogwash. And I'm going to tell you why. When your first date starts becoming your steady date, and if you've been wearing one of those fake masks from the get-go, then she's eventually going to start seeing the real you, and she may not like what she sees. And you don't want that because you've been there before. So to avoid all of that, what I recommend is for you to just be you and nothing phony. And I mean from the very get-go. And trust me, you'll be glad you did. But please, use some common sense too, and dress appropriately, and use some good manners when you're dating. And I'm going to say something right now that you should always remember. You will never ever get a second chance to make a first impression. So when you get back out there in the dating scene again, then try to always make that first impression a good one. And always remember too that other people's perception of you will always be different than the perception that you have of yourself. So now, what I'm going to try to talk about right here is really just for you divorced men who would like to have a second chance at marriage. Only this time, you would like for it to be with the right kind of woman. But first of all, let's talk about you. When you go out on that first date, she'll be asking you a lot of questions. You know, she just wants to get to know you. And she's trying to decide in her own mind if you are a keeper or not. So whatever you do, please just be totally honest about yourself. Don't be anything that's phony or fake. You know, just be yourself. And I'm going to tell you right now, the very best thing about always telling the truth is the fact that you will never, ever have to remember what you said. And if your date cannot handle the truth and does not want to go out with you again, then be thankful, because you probably just dodged a bullet. But then on the other hand, if you've been totally honest with her and she would still like to go out with you again, then you may have something going here. So now let's talk about her a little bit and what you should probably watch for to see if you think she's going to be a keeper or not. The very first thing you should do is pay very close attention to what she says and the attitude that she uses when she says it, and how she treats other people. For instance, if she's rude to the waiter or the waitress at the restaurant, that's a big red flag. Or if she's often saying bad things about other people, then watch out, because that's another red flag. And when it's your turn to talk, but yet she keeps interrupting you so she can tell you her story, then that's also a big red flag. And if everything is always about her and her only, then please don't walk away from her, because you better run away from her. And here's a real good one. Pay very close attention to who she hangs out with, who her friends are. Because I'm going to tell you right now, there's an old saying that is absolutely true. Birds of the same feather all flock together. So anyway, if you don't spot any big red flags on the lady, and if she passes all of these tests in your own mind, and you think she's a keeper, then what we may be hearing right here are wedding bells. And I mean, that is, if she thinks you're a keeper too. But seriously, what you're really looking for is simply compatibility. Because a man and a woman are like two pieces of a puzzle to a larger picture, and the picture is not complete until the two pieces are joined together. And I believe that that's just the way that God intended for it to be. And I'm telling you right now, there is nothing better than sharing your life with the woman who you love, and she loves you too. And I know that for a fact. But let's just say that you never want to remarry. Well, I think that's okay too, because there are some people, both men and women, who are very happy just being single. So there you go. Now I will admit, it did take me a long time to get over the bitterness and the hurt from my first wife. And it took me a long time to regain any trust in women. And I will admit too, that even after all of these many years, I have never recovered 100% from all of that. But at least I have learned to live with it, to the point where I very seldom ever think about it anymore. And that's a good thing. Anytime somebody is hurt by another person, whether it's physical or whether it's mental, it's just human nature to want to strike back at that person and get revenge. And let me tell you this, I am no different, because I did get my revenge. And let me tell you just how I did it. After my first wife left me, I picked up all the pieces and I went on with my life. And it was hard, but I did keep my life together. And I set a good example for my children to follow. And I was very successful in all of my endeavors. And I even started my own small business, and I was very successful at that too. And I'm going to tell you what, that was not what my ex-wife was wanting to see. Oh no, that's not what she wanted to see at all. She wanted to be able to point her finger at me and then look at her family and friends in the face and say, "You see, I told you so." But that's not what happened. And she is not happy. And that's what I call sweet revenge. And as you probably already know, and whether it's even justifiable or not, many of these ex-wives can be very vicious, and their tongues can be sharper than a sword. And so I learned a long time ago that the best thing for me to do was to just stay away from her. And that has always worked out really well for me, because the less I see her face or hear her voice, then the happier I am. Out of sight, out of mind. And putting her out of my mind was actually easier than I thought it would be, because I eventually just started realizing that just because she's the mother of my children does not give her the right to be personally involved in my life anymore. So I just started ignoring her completely, and she did not like that. So there you go, all of you newly divorced gentlemen who are out there. I know exactly how you feel. But if you want to make your ex-wife real happy, then go ahead. Crawl into that liquor bottle. Get on drugs. Quit your job. Be a bum. And while you're at it, go ahead and be one of those sad country and western songs. And oh yes, that will make your ex-wife real happy, and she will love it. But if you want real revenge, then do what I did. Go on with your life and be successful. And now I'm going to tell you something that I learned from my past experience, and you can chisel this statement in granite. When you fall in love with a woman, it does not matter how much you love her. You can love her with all of your heart, and you can love her with all of your soul, but it's still no guarantee that she's going to love you back. And like that or not, that's just the way that it really is. And I eventually just had to learn to accept it and realize that that's just one of the cold hard facts of life. And I'm telling you, I learned that the hard way. You may be down in the dumps right now, and you think you're at the very lowest point in your life. And you may very well be at that very lowest point in your life. But here's the thing, keep the faith, because the best part of your life may be yet to come. It did for me, and it can for you too. And with all of that said, I want to say thank you to all of you newly divorced gentlemen out there for listening to my audio, and I sincerely hope that it will be beneficial to you in your future. Okay, now that I have reached the end, then let me say this. If you like my audio, then please click on that thumbs up button. And don't be bashful either. So please send me a comment and let me know what you think. Thank you again, and goodbye.